It's an honor to be here, and I'm very excited to be joined by an amazing panel, Asha Troshansky from Value for Women and Denis Karema from SokoFresh. My name is Julia Mensink. I am Head of Impact at Acumen. And today we have a very exciting day because we're launching our gender report. And we have the joy of sharing that with all of you. But also we wanted to share the insights that we've built in our gender inclusion work. We're also joined by a few moderators that are going to help the conversation later on in the workshop components, because today will not only be about what we share, but also about how we can share amongst each other and we can learn from examples. In particular for gender, that's where the work comes to life and that's where the work is needed instead of the high-level concepts. So very excited to be joined by Katie Halloran from Acumen. If you could just lift your hand over there on this side. We've got Robert Melosh, I'm not sure I pronounce it, Melosh from 2X Global. We've got Patricia Shin-Sweeney in the middle, and we've got Yasmina Zeidman from Acumen, my wonderful colleague. So later on we'll be breaking up in the workshop, but before we do, I wanted to share what we'll be talking about today. So we'll have three components before we go into the workshop. And the first one is really about why should investors care about gender inclusion? And I'll share a couple of pointers for that. Then Asya will take over and share the real findings from the report that is called Pathways to Growth, and share about how gender-smart business actions can work and which results we have delivered in our report based on our research. And Denis will share what that looks like from a company perspective when he talks about his experience at SokoFresh. And as I said, then we'll break up in discussions and we'll round up with some takeaways and ideally a call for action that you might actually incorporate next week when you're back at your desks. So I'll start with why should investors care? And I might just start with the punchline. Gender inclusion is doable. And investors and companies can take actions to promote gender equality, and we have results and pathways to share. So this is where it's not only about why it matters, but also what to actually do and how to take action in your context, whether that is whether you're operating at an investor or in your grant giving or at a company level. And why investors should care about this is also because we know, and there's plenty of research out there, that demonstrates that more equitable companies are more profitable, sustainable, and therefore impactful. So for anybody at SOCAP, that should be interesting. Also, the business case is well researched already. So I'll share a couple of data points, but then we'll go into what it can actually look like in terms of implementation. But just in case you're curious or want to be reminded, as consumers, over 70% of household spending is done by women. And that represents $32 trillion globally. And yet, a lot of that still remains untapped. Similarly, in terms of employees, 61% versus 91 men have 61% of women versus 90% of men are employed. In terms of management, we know that gender diverse leadership teams outperform with 39% compared to their counterparts. They reduce costs, increase productivity, and in 87% of the time they make better decisions, 60% show better results, and 90% have higher revenue from innovation. And finally, in terms of the role of women as entrepreneurs, it's still shocking that it's only a handful of percentage of women that get the funding globally. And I think this is where, even when you recognize that that is a gross inequity, if you then think about what that money then does, that does flow to women, that typically only serves 25% of the capital they actually need. So in sum, there's an untapped potential. So advancing gender equity creates untapped opportunities to create economic value and social impact, both for companies and investors. And what that looks like for an investor, for us as Acumen, we've taken gender actions for multiple years. In fact, we've been at it for over 10 years. And what we've done is being active in multiple levers. And that's one of the lessons that we wanted to share based on our research in the last couple of years, is that it's really important to focus on those levers that are within your reach. And that includes recognizing what is your sphere of influence. And the actions that you can take as an investor, they typically start, but they can work in parallel in terms of what you do with your own teams. So internally, thinking about organizational policy, training, planning, and expertise, and including measurement. But then also, how do you incorporate gender awareness and understanding throughout your investment process? And there's quite clean, easy wins where you can integrate gender as part of your diligence, as well as your recognition of what your portfolio and your company profiles look like. And most importantly, for today's conversation, how can you be supportive of the company's post-investment in terms of technical assistance? And this is where we're very excited to be able to share the lessons of which are the pathways that work and how, as an investor, can you support your companies with actions that drive both business and social outcomes. So I'll hand over to Asja now, who's going to describe some of the findings that are relevant at the company level.
Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and to be having this conversation about what works, which is our favorite conversation at Value for Women, because we want gender inclusion to be everyone's business and for it to be really accessible and actionable rather than something that lives high in the sky and we don't know exactly what it means to promote gender equality. So I want to start today by giving 2 quick points of background. And the first point is really what we mean when we say gender inclusion or gender smart practices. Essentially, what we are talking about is improving opportunities for women, more opportunities for women, better opportunities for women, and not being satisfied with the status quo until women are benefiting, participating, leading equally to men. The second point of background is to very, very briefly introduce Value for Women, because our mission is to advance these gender smart practices that we're talking about today. We are actually a women-led global social enterprise ourselves and squarely focused on promoting gender inclusion in partnership with the private sector, who we believe has the power, all the tools to catalyze real change. We work hand in hand with investors, donors, and companies and business support organizations to close gender gaps. And so this is the perfect segue for talking about our report today, because this report is all about making gender smart practices tangible through extensive case studies and stories of change that really show what works. And the report, as Julia mentioned, is called Pathways to Growth, Gender Smart Business Actions That Work. What we're seeking to do is to inspire replication, experimentation for people to really take up this work in their organizations. And what the report is essentially a research report, and coming out of that research is a lot of how-to and practical examples and guidance. The actual research piece of it answers 3 questions, and those are: 1, what does it look like when companies achieve gender results? 2, which pathways, we tried to pinpoint, like what are the trends, which pathways or sets of strategies result in the most impacts for women? And then 3, what are some of the success factors? So this report is a bit different from other reports. It is while written by practitioners, Acumen and ourselves, the report is robust and draws from over 100 case studies from our own portfolio, from Acumen's, and from peer organizations. We focus on cases. There are 18 stories of change. And third, it's right-sized for businesses, particularly early-stage businesses in the emerging market context that often are working in a context of scarce time, scarce resources. Okay, so let's get into, sorry, I said all these. Let's get into the report itself and some of the content. So what you're looking at here is a summary of the 6 pathways we are recommending in the report. And again, these are lines of action that have both a strong business case, which is really important for businesses, right? For them to be excited about this work, for them to be able to sustain this work, and also represent easier ways to get started. These generate both social and business results, which again is appealing to socially minded businesses that are trying to solve for either the double bottom line or the triple bottom line, however you have it. And so I want to say a bit more on each of these pathways, and I invite you to not zone out and to listen closely, because I will ask you which of these are relevant to you, and you can only answer that question if you're listening. Okay. So pathway 1 is about increasing benefit to women consumers and growing market share for businesses. So here, the focus is taking an intentional approach to reaching more women with high impact product and services. And this could look a number of different ways. It could mean improving your value proposition to directly speak to women, improving your marketing, being really intentional about the delivery channels, how you're getting the product and services into the hands of women. So first question, who has worked on this one within your organization, either directly or indirectly? All right. And who's curious about this one? Maybe hasn't worked on directly, but curious to learn more. All right, great, thank you. Okay, pathway 2 is about agricultural supply chains. Both Acumen and Value for Women work quite a bit in agriculture. And this pathway is specifically about actions that connect women to formal supply chains so that they can reap the full benefits of those supply chains. And for companies to be able to benefit from the increased quantity of volume and quality of product. There's some Root Capital folks in the room who do a lot of work on this pathway as well. So who's worked in this pathway within their organizations? Okay, curious to learn more? All right, okay, great. Okay, different people raising their hands. Okay, pathways 3 through 6 cast an eye inward on the workforce, which for some businesses, particularly last mile distribution business, also includes commission-based sales agents. These pathways help to attract and retain a talented workforce, and they cover recruitment, so how to hire more women into quality jobs, helping women sales agents to be successful and to increase their sales, fostering a work culture where women thrive, and ensuring safety in the workplace. So who has worked on any one of these? Okay, I expect almost everyone between these 4. And curious to learn more. Okay, both, right? Like there's more that we could be doing to create workplaces where women thrive and lead and grow and are really successful. So what's cool about this report is that we get into details about each one of these, what it looks like for early stage companies. And soon you'll hear a really tangible example from my colleague Denis, the CEO of SokoFresh. They are featured in this report. I'm also going to take the opportunity to preview one more case, just so you have another one, a little bit more paint on the canvas of what this looks like in practice. So I'm going to talk about Work, which is an agricultural social enterprise that operates in Ghana and Sierra Leone. The company works with 22,000 farmers, 39% of whom are women. And the company is both an aggregator of staple grains like maize, soy, and shea. And they also sell inputs and provide training that helps farmers to improve crop yields. So for many years, the business model of this company was to operate through a lead farmer model. But many farmers were located really far from lead farmers, which meant that they could not transact as often as they wanted to. And the company's leadership noticed that women in particular could not sell as often as they wanted to because of the disproportionate limitations that they faced in terms of mobility and time poverty, right? Like they were ready to sell, but they didn't have the time or couldn't access the lead farmers. And so Work, they were committed to reaching more farmers and more women especially, and they decided to transform their model and to move to hubs or community-based points of sale that they could locate in the communities close to the women farmers. And they also did something which was quite unprecedented in the areas where they work. They hired women to staff all of these hubs. So 150 new positions, first formal paid employment for a lot of these women. And the results really exceeded their expectations on the business side. I won't go through all the numbers, but you can see that they significantly increased how much crop they were able to source. And in particular, they saw women increase their total sales to the company because now they were able to sell more frequently on the schedule and on the terms that worked well for them. And then there were also impressive outcomes for women's livelihoods. 61% of women farmers reported that their quality of life was very much improved since they had begun working with the company. So this is but one inspiring story, and if we zoom out, I think a testament to the importance of taking an intentional approach. These kinds of results don't happen by accident. They do take some intentionality and some action, but they are also achievable by companies operating in challenging contexts. And so the other piece in the report, again, is that we break down what are the steps that you can get started. So for this one, for example, for this pathway that's focused on increasing supply from women farmers, the work really starts with collecting data and not just counting the women, not just understanding how many women there are, but actually asking women what's working for you about our business model, what's not working for you, what can we improve, what can we do better. Right? This doesn't necessarily take like a huge market research study. There are sort of lighter touch ways to engage and to ask your suppliers or your consumers or your employees some of these questions. Other steps that agricultural companies can take, addressing some of those constraints to accessibility that work did, and then making it easier for women to supply to the company. So, for example, making sure that you don't have requirements that women can't meet, like requiring that women own a certain amount of land before they can supply to the company. So again, this is just one pathway. There are 5 additional ones. There's a lot of richness in the report, so hopefully this piques your interest in learning more, because today is the day we launch it. So it's out in the public domain for all of your reading pleasure. Thank you for indulging me and listening about all the pathways. And now I'll turn it over to Denis.
Thanks a lot. I think there's quite some great insights. I'm still getting to learn even as I'm seated in front here. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denis Karema. I'm the CEO of SokoFresh. Yes, and we are a company that is working on the issue of post-harvest loss. So 30 to 40% of produce that is grown in part of the world gets lost because of inadequate and aggregation infrastructure. And so this is loss that is preventable. This is in fruits, in vegetables, and we work on solving that issue by providing solar cold rooms as well as market access. So we are able to guarantee demand for all the produce that can be aggregated through these centers. We've done it for the past 5 years now. Just an example, last year we handled 4,000 metric tons of produce. We have 26 of these solar cold rooms that we build and deploy in Kenya. And one of our ambitions is how can we be able to increase the number of women who staff and also who we are able to serve as farmers. And so far we've served over 10,000 smallholder farmers. And for me, when I think about the work that we've been doing in gender, it's not thoughts that just came when we started our interactions with Value for Women. So how I spent my school holidays when I grew up in Kenya, I would spend it mostly upcountry in my grandmother's farm. And most of those farms, the people who put in the most effort and the people who work in those farms are the women. So they put in a lot of work, but oftentimes when it comes to the sale of produce or when it comes to the money, they are often left out. And so for me, I think I'm quite passionate about how we can be able to bring more equity in agriculture and enable women to actually be able to get the reward for the effort that they put in. So when we looked at our gender work, I think one of the things that is very interesting is that when you have an outsider come and help you go through the different aspects of your business and to see the opportunities for gender inclusion, then a lot of things surface that provide opportunities for intentional implementation of gender strategies. And so for us, one of the things is that we work in a model where we have field agents. These are community people within the community who actually are the ones who onboard the farmers and who facilitate the aggregation of produce. And so it's really important that we are able to find people within those communities that can build trust with the farmers, that can be able to actually help us achieve the targets and goals we have. And so in that specific element, we saw that we had a high number of male field agents and very few female field agents. And so we started to ask ourselves, how can we be able to recruit field agents who are female? What is the challenge? How are we not able to get to this? And we found that there is quite an interconnection between the field agents and also having field staff who are female. So the field staff are our own employees who run that hub and who are the supervisors of all these agents within one of those communities. And there we were also having a challenge where we had more male staff. Actually, when we would put out advertisements, we would get like 49 men and 1 lady apply for the job. And so we even had to ask ourselves, why are women not applying for these jobs? And then you start to see that oftentimes field jobs are structured in a way that is more suitable for men than for women, because then you go to a remote area, some of those areas when it's a female staff, they start to think, can I find a school for my child? Can you give me a bit of time to settle down before you start asking me to meet all my KPIs? And so you sort of have to really put yourself in the shoes of this potential staff and see and understand why there are all those disparities, and then start to roll out a plan that can actually include more women in it. And then the other one is we started looking internally, especially on issues of safeguarding, on women's satisfaction as they work within the organization, because we want to build an organization that has a great culture. For me as a CEO, one of the things that I look at is how can I retain staff and give them a pathway towards actually growing within the organization, because recruitment takes a lot of time and effort, and I would rather train and empower the staff that we have. And so we started looking at our policies addressing some of the challenges that would make it difficult for women to stay within the business and to actually have a high level of satisfaction. And so there is more that we can do, and I think we've done quite a good job already looking at some of these challenges. And so I think some of the results, as you can see there, is we've been able to move in just 5 months. The satisfaction score for our women staff has moved from 54% to 83%. The sense of having a good work-life balance has increased from 63% to 89%, and the sense of belonging has increased to 94%. And we don't stop there. We are quite keen to actually still continue with this work, because this work also translates to better business results. We've seen a 2.5x growth in our business year on year, and a lot of it is really trying to understand what are the challenges that our staff are facing, what are the challenges that are making us not to have diversity within the business, because it's good, it brings new ideas, so it's good for business, but it's also good for impact, because then we are able to reach women farmers because we have women agents and because we have women hub operators. So it works well for us, and as I've said, women are the ones in the farms. So if you're going door to door recruiting farmers, if you have a woman staff who's going to do the recruitment, they most likely will have a better outcome towards explaining what we do as a business and then being able to recruit more farmers. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to go into the next part of our workshop. We have promised a participatory element, so that's what we're going to transition to now. We're going to have. Oh, sorry. You're right. Yes. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, we'll take 2 questions first. So that's the first part of the participation. 2 questions.
So regarding the SokoFresh case,
Yeah. Or you can project. Yeah.
This one's probably so maybe actually, you know what, that one before I this one. I'm here. A bit discreet, but so for the SokoFresh case, which is very interesting, I'm curious to know what was the process from data insights towards action? What was the process in between?
Why don't you start?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first bit was really identifying what are the issues that we have, and then starting to look at which ones can we be able to resolve in the short term, in the medium term, and which ones require a bit more effort and a bit more understanding. Because I think from the data we could clearly see. Here we have some quick wins that we can be able to have, but then there is a bit of work that still requires us to actually work in a longer trajectory. So from the data, we looked at 6 of the pathways that we could be able to integrate. We saw that 3 of them we can actually be able to do them within 2 quarters of our business year, and then the rest we have been able to think about how do we stagger them towards getting to the full results that we desire. Yeah, so I think the period is quite short. It just requires a buy-in of the management and the board. When the buy-in is there, then you can start the implementation almost immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to say that the data came from a diagnostic that included an employee survey that we ran with SokoFresh, and then the important piece, of course, was sex disaggregating the data, identifying what are some of the disparities, and then trying to dig in, like have some conversations to understand what was behind them, because the data didn't necessarily say like this, we see this disparity, we see X, therefore you do Y. It took a little bit more like digging and thinking and discussing to identify what was the path forward. One more. Yeah. Do we need the microphone? I think so. Sorry. Thank you. You can stand. Yeah. This one. Yeah. I can't.
I have a 2-part question. Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, so those results are very impressive. And it got me thinking about what then is the incremental plan for continued enhancement or improvement? And or do you start then taking a look at how do you get the applications to go from 49 and 1 to bringing more women in? Is that the catalyst? You get those first handful of women, and then is the focus then on the gender, or the incremental enhancement from the satisfaction and the results that you've gotten?
There's a mic on your chair.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's both. So, for example, when you look at how to be able to have more women as hub operators, we realize that we might never have a lot of luck with just broadcasting our application saying we encourage women to apply. So we now look at it differently. We started an internship program where we are bringing in fresh graduates who are women to come and learn about our business model, to come and learn about all these operations that they can then be able to do, and then we are able to transition them from the internship into being hub operators. So we had to use a very different kind of tact. So in 3 to 6 months, we've gone through the internship program, we've been able to train them, and then now we can post them as hub operators. And so the how depends on our realities. So we first started by changing the JD, saying, you can have women apply, but when you don't see results, then you go back to the drawing board. And I think that's the beauty of having a gender action plan, that when things don't work, and, for a startup, we keep looking for different ways to solve the problem. So we don't give up. We just look and say, okay, maybe an internship program is the way to go. And we've seen that that actually works well. In terms of the scores, so it's continually every quarter being able to do surveys with our staff to just get to understand, what is improving, what is stagnating, and then as management, and when we go back to our board, this is what we think we should be able to do to improve the score. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to break up. Yeah, that was a really worthy share. Thank you so much. So now we're going to break up into 4 groups, 6 groups. 6 groups. Okay, we're going to break up into 6 groups. And in each group, you are going to have a moderator who is going to start with some remarks on what's going well for them and their organizations and how they're promoting gender inclusion. And then we're going to have a little bit of a round robin share to answer 2 questions. What is working well and what could we do better? So hopefully it's a chance to reflect based on what you've heard today in the panel and some of these different pathways and based on what you're doing in your own organizations. So I'm not going to have us count off because I think that'll take too long. So just pick a group and we'll try to have like balance, look for balance in numbers. So let's do group one group over here.
Shuffle the chairs.
Yeah, shuffle the chairs. 1 group in that corner, 1 group over there, 1 group over here, and 1 group in the middle, and 1 group outside. If I can have everyone's attention. I know, that's like endorsement of all the conversations you're having. So we just want like a little taste of everyone's conversations, not a full sum up because no one wants that, but like 1 golden nugget from each group. If I could kindly, I'll just point to groups and you can maybe, I think you might have to come up here because otherwise we can't hear you. So Julia, do you want to start us off? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I think I'm going to squeeze in 2 points. It's just wonderful once you open up what is going well to hear the level of action and awareness that's already taking place. And I think there is a great recognition of how much more there is to do. But also how gender can be integrated when you think about climate or within any action in your operation, whether you're advising or investing, you can identify gender projects everywhere because, frankly, women are everywhere, and there's also a point around making sure we include the men into the conversation because there's no gender without all of us. And a final nugget, I think, which is really helpful and is also one we try to do in the report, is that gender tends to have either an academic or an activist energy to it that sometimes gets in the way of action. And I think what we really try to do is show positive next steps that people can implement and things can roll from there. So don't try to make it into this comprehensive or encompassing thing. You can take a small action and you can do that by listening and by understanding what women are experiencing in your context. More to say, but I'll pause here and I'll allow the other group moderators to come through.
Great. Katie, do you want to go next?
This is not going to capture everything we talked about at all, but I'll just mention 3 things. I think one of the things we heard, which was super interesting, is that there are outliers that we need to pay attention to. So a representative in our group was talking about how she works with a 64 CDFIs, the majority of which are run by women. Why is that? Understanding who are they in the community? How can we use them as models in the community? So that's one. The second is making sure that companies are resourced. So great to have a gender action plan, but what happens when you walk away, when the program is over, making sure that there are resources that are sustained and that the company has the intentionality and the motivation to keep it going. And then I think finally influencing models. I think modeling this in the workforce and the leadership, it's really important to understand. And obviously, SoCAP brought this up. This is something that we're hearing is that women customers are going to relate to women in the workforce. So those are a few thoughts.
Thank you, Katie.
Yasmina, would you like to next?
Thank you. We had an amazing group that was working on this question around gender on all different ways. But if I had to boil down a few nuggets, one was the idea of kind of going beyond counting, and folks in our group were thinking really creatively about how do you build gender equity into the design of a fund or an investment strategy or a product to really identify opportunities for deeper impact rather than the kind of surface level. And the other thing that we talked a lot about was kind of looking at both risk and value creation, recognizing that if you overlook issues of gender inequality or policies that make it harder for women to participate in the workforce, things like gender-based violence, that you do face real risks that can impact your business, your fund, your investment. But beyond that, there's also incredible opportunities for value creation and ways to distinguish a product or fund in a way that attracts and creates value. So those are some of the big themes, but everybody's doing really great work, and it was quite inspiring.
Oh, perfect.
So similar to some of the comments before, but our focus was really around how do we get the TA right. So your report talks about the importance of TA, and we discussed that it's got to be targeted toward gender, otherwise make it sort of lost in the shuffle, and then some sort of selection process so entrepreneurs can raise their hand and say, yes, I'd like support in implementing gender and those outcomes. So that was really the heart of it, was around getting that correct. And then also I want to just say we had two academics in our group, which was super fun. So we have two individuals who are both getting their graduate degrees in this work, and just it's so cool to think you can just go to school for that at the graduate level. So just have to give a plug to our two. There they are. They're right there. So there. Thanks.
Patricia?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm hiding over here. I was creeping. Okay, so we talked first about some issues. One, that gender bias kind of can often be below the surface, and actually, I mean, I think it was disappointing. It's still somewhat universal across geography. And one of the things that I had mentioned is sometimes, you know, women within organizations don't realize they are biased as well. So processes need to like pull that out to the surface, right? And part of that can be societal or otherwise. One of the other issues we talked about was funds often choose to play down the gender piece of their lens or their impact because they're worried that that will affect how they raise. So I think that's an issue that gets to the next point, which is, and I've actually heard this across many conferences lately, but that there needs to be more education of wealth advisors, RIAs, fund-to-fund level on the investment opportunity and the financial returns opportunity, not just the kind of academic or feel-good opportunity in gender diversity. And so we talked about how, there is progress. There are parties doing that, including in our group, but it's more to be done. And that comes back to this greater point of advisors. So I even said, Value for Women does this with different companies. But when I asked, are there consultancies or other advisory firms that come into companies and actually look at the gender opportunity? Can everyone raise their hand if they know other parties that do that? Great. Yes. Perfect. Is it your organizations? Yeah. Great. What are your organizations?
I work at IDEO.org.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. Oh, okay. Well, okay. Yes, that's true. Fine. Fair. Good. Everyone now knows them. And then just a few things that I've worked. KPIs that are built into the success, including KPIs where there's more women in leadership within a company, those types of things. And then again, education around non-single note impact or single theme impact. So if it's, you're interested in climate, why can't you look at climate and gender and the matrix of opportunities that drive returns?
Great. All excellent points. We had a really rich conversation that I won't do justice to, but I will say that I think everyone in our group is trying to figure out how to live their values when it comes to gender inclusion. And for some of us are support organizations, so that means helping others to go from plan to action, and that's where the challenge lies. And others that have their own companies are trying to figure out how to do things like provide subsidized childcare for all of their employees, which is a really important objective, but also challenging, right? I think one share blew all of our minds, and so I don't think I'll do. Do you want to say a word about your organization? Because it does really cool work, and it's like a way to sort of reimagine the workplace. So I'd love to hand the mic to you for a second.
Thank you. So I'm the founder of an organization called Period Reality, and we educate about and advocate for living in sync with your cycle. And it's based on this idea that we live in a world designed around the 24-hour hormonal cycle of men. And that's not how people with menstrual cycles operate. So obviously every day our hormones are balanced differently, and that's going to influence how we show up. So when we look at gender equity, and especially in the workplace, and you think about how our processes and our systems and everything is built, and how we look at productivity and creativity, and every day we have to show up in the same way, that's just physically impossible. So there's a huge opportunity here, obviously on an individual level for our own health and well-being, but also for organizations to think about how can we leverage the different strengths that also show up throughout the month, different in our organization. So for those of you, probably not necessarily all in this room, but for those that are always asking about what's the financial ROI, is that people will be more productive and creative and effective if they have more ownership of their own agenda, can plan their things according to their strengths. One of the examples I shared in our group is that biologically, women who ovulate want to nature wants you to go out and make babies. So you're external focused. You like to be around people, networking, presenting, making deals, negotiating is great for that time. As you head into your period, not so much. You'd rather be by yourself on the sofa. Apart from the physical discomfort you might be experiencing, that's not a great time to do a presentation, right? So if you've done one 2 weeks ago and you smashed it, and you do one today and it's not going so well, we're really good in beating ourselves up about that. Right? It's I can do it. Why didn't I do it today? And this whole idea is about giving ourselves some grace as well. So do a check-in with ourselves in the morning and be okay, this is probably not going to be my best work, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. But then again, also in a professional setting, we can, there's a huge opportunity there. So don't be afraid if you've not heard this before. It's the reason why I'm doing this work, because I was so frustrated that no one was doing this work. But please come and find me, because I want to get this out to 1 billion people by 2030, and I need all the help I can get. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so really cool work. Thank you so much for sharing. And we are coming to closing, so we'll just close with a few calls for action. Number one, I don't know if this still is your thunder, Julia, but you can repeat as well. Read the report. It's there. There's the QR code. It's out today. So we are just super jazzed and excited about it, and hope that it serves you in whatever work that you do. And two, I wanted to advertise a new Value for Women initiative. We are looking for partners, investors, companies who are interested in taking the first, second, or 25th step on your gender inclusion journey. And we are launching a hub with a lot of free resources and community for early stage companies to get started on hiring more women, creating gender inclusive workplaces, and designing and delivering high impact products and services for women customers. So I have a printout of a QR code, but it'll be all over the LinkedIn. So just wanted to invite you all to partake.
Thank you, Asia. I wanted to share my heartfelt appreciation for all the work that you're already doing and sharing. And I came to this conference thinking about my daughter Ella and my son Aiden. Ella is 6, Aiden is 8. And I often find myself having to have quite difficult conversations when I walked into school. Why, if Ella grows up and she chooses to be an entrepreneur, she might not get the capital that boys like Aiden will get. And it's really about the outrage that I felt that drove my initial energy. How can you then channel the rage into actions? But in this conference, both in conversations yesterday and today, I actually feel very hopeful and excited by the work that's already being done. So thank you for all that you do. And one final thought is connected to the opening plenary, where despite all the grand challenges the planet faces and social capital needs to address, one of the challenges that stood out to me was mentioned is actually comfort, and how we can transition from intention to action. And I think the call was to do something uncomfortable next week. And I thought that doesn't sound like a good selling point. So why can't I make it like, we've done the hard work for you. You can make it comfortable by having a nice cup of tea or coffee, read this report. Step 2 is listen to women in your context to understand what it is that you could do, and take one mini step towards that.